Hey y'all, I want to talk to you today about a new churchism. Now remember, we've defined a churchism as something that may be completely false or maybe a half truth that we believe about church. And today I want to talk to you about your pastor. Now, you might say to yourself, that's kind of self-serving, Jack, because you're a pastor. And I would say that most of the time you would be right, and I would even be reluctant to speak about this, except for the fact that God has placed me at an incredibly supportive and loving and helpful church that takes really good care of me. And so I can talk about these things not from a point of view saying I want them, but I've also been in the ministry for over 30 years, and I've seen not only in my own life but in the lives of my colleagues how pastors are often treated in the ministry. And so I want to talk to you about some things that are often said about pastors, and I want to challenge you a little bit to think about the reality of those things. Um, the first one is, well, he's a preacher, but not really a pastor. What they mean by that is, well, he's a good speaker, but that's all. On the other end of the spectrum, I've heard people say, well, he really cares about people, but he's not much of a preacher. And then the other one that's often said is, well, the last pastor, old brother so and so, he did things a lot differently. Now, what I want you to really think about when you're saying those things is the reality is you're saying, I just really don't like this guy. And I'm trying to come up with a good excuse for the reason why I don't like him. And I can't come up with anything biblical, so I've got to come up with something else. The reality is that your pastor is not perfect, and that he may be a good preacher and have weaknesses in other areas of his ministry. Or he may be a terrible preacher and have strengths in other areas of his ministry. All those things may be true. And the reality is that he may not measure up to the guy who came before him. All of those things may be true. But I want you to consider a couple of things. First of all, the days when pastors are are numerous, those days are over. There used to be a day when we had 3 or 4 or 5 pastors available for every church that was there. But in evangelical life today, we have some startling statistics. Number one, pastors are getting older. And you say, well, we're all getting older. That's not what I mean. The average age of a pastor is going up, not down, and it's going up at an alarming rate. The average age of a pastor is almost 55 years old now, and yet often pastor search committees say, well, we want a young guy with a doctorate degree who's got 10 years of experience. It's just not going to happen. The pastorate is aging. Younger men are finding other things to do. In fact, younger men are not enrolling in seminaries and Bible colleges like they used to. Seminary training is enrollment is down almost 15%. And when we think about not only are not the younger ones coming into the ministry, but at this moment, around 40% of those who are in the ministry are considering leaving because of the pressures and the difficulties. I don't know if you realize it, but the stress of the pastorate is somewhere between It's right up there with the air traffic controller. It's a difficult job, a calling. And the reality is, I've heard Derek Prime said, look, if you can do anything else, then do it, because that means you're not really called of God. Pastors don't do it for the money. They don't do it because they enjoy getting griped at or overanalyzed. Pastors do it because they're called, because they love you, and because they love the Lord. And I know there's some bad apples in every bunch, and those rotten eggs ruin it for all of us. I understand that. But the vast majority are godly men who are seeking to follow God and seeking to share the gospel and seeking to win people to the Lord and seeking to help people to grow in their faith. The vast majority of them. So when you come to that place where you're just, when you're just being critical, and trust me, after over almost 40 years in the ministry, I understand I'm not going to please everybody, and there's a percentage that no matter what I do, I'm not going to please them. I understand that. But I want you to think about this. When you get to that point when you start being critical of your pastor, I want you to think about these questions. Number one, have you prayed? Have you prayed for your pastor? Have you prayed for your attitude about your pastor? Have you prayed for God to do a work in his life and in your life? How much have you prayed about it? I'll almost I'll almost guarantee that when we get to those times when we're being overcritical about anyone, it's usually those people we haven't prayed about at all. Number two, have you done your part to be an encouragement to your pastor? Have you just said a word of encouragement? Maybe he does struggle with his preaching. Find something good that you can say. And just say a word of encouragement. I guarantee you it will mean a lot to him, because often the only thing he hears are the negative. Say a word of encouragement to your pastor. And then, thirdly, have you helped? Have you said, Pastor, how can I help you? Pastor, can I go with you to visit those folks in the hospital? Pastor, what can I do to take the load off your shoulders? How can I help you through your week this week? Have you prayed? Have you encouraged? Have you helped? When you begin to ask yourself those questions and you begin to answer them in a godly way, then you'll remember what Paul said, that those who minister in the word are worthy of double honor. I'm not saying this so that my church will compliment me or anything. My church does that already. They love me well. I'm saying this because I know friends and brothers in Christ who hate to come into the office on Monday because they've just gotten beat up on Sunday. And there's no one harder on preachers than preachers. They beat themselves up for what they should have said, how they should have said it, what they missed, what they didn't say, all the things that they could have done better. Trust me, they're doing that on Monday. But you have an opportunity to be a minister to your minister. How much difference would it make if on Sunday morning, instead of buttonholing your pastor in the hallway and griping to him because the paper towels are out in the bathroom, how much different would it make if you grabbed him by the hand and said, "Hey, Pastor, I know you got to preach here in a minute. Can I just pray with you right here?" And just holding his hand and praying for him and asking God to use him in a mighty way. How much difference would that make? How much difference would it make if he showed up at 11:30 at his office and said, "Hey, come on, I want to buy you lunch today"? How much difference would it make if he opened the mail on Monday or Tuesday and there's just a little card in it and said, "Lord," that said, "Pastor, I'm asking the Lord to bless you today, and I'm just thankful for you." Your pastor isn't perfect, far from it. But the churchism is that the pastor is the hired hand that just does the work while we watch and criticize. It's just not biblical. Though your pastor isn't perfect, if you have a man of God in the pulpit in your church, appreciate him, encourage him, pray for him, and help him. God bless you.